by default on just about any Windows server or PC operating system. It's also available for Linux, for Mac. I actually have it on here, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So, and then also it's to maybe get you to think, even if you don't decide to use PowerShell, you can think about how you could maybe use a different programming language to help with automation and making your job reproducible and consistent. And I think that this color scheme for this PowerPoint presentation is beautiful. I cannot take any credit for it. I got it off of the internet. I think it's a Jewish association or something. But anyway, so here we go. So I'm Matt Mann, as I like to say, Matt Manica, that is. So I'm a data professional for decades, starting as a business analyst, then became an ETL development manager for a data warehousing team. Then I decided I wanted to move to Chicago. I couldn't take all my employees with me, so I had to do a lateral move. And so I became a data architect. And Ross mentioned we have an opening for a DBA. It's like, well, okay, I've got that skill set. So yeah, that's my current job and title. I have experience VBA, call it what you will, a programming language or not. Visual Basic for applications, that is. Perl, a lot of experience in Perl, like a decade. Not recently necessarily, but did some pretty cool stuff with that. PL SQL, you might recognize, is Oracle's version of SQL in programming, and T-SQL obviously is Microsoft's version. Programming and scripting languages, for myself, I wrote code. It was part of my job, but it wasn't so much what I was paid to do. It's what I did to get a different job function done, right? So that's kind of how you can think about this. As a database administrator, PowerShell is going to help get your job done potentially. So I would say familiarity with coding is definitely helpful, but you can do some very basic stuff with absolutely zero experience with any coding at all. Any questions before we dive in? All right. Overview. So we're going to talk about what PowerShell is, how it's useful as a DBA, some general uses of it. I'll talk about modules. What's a module? You'll find out. And I don't know if anybody else is nervous, but there's going to be a little bit of a live demonstration. We'll see how that goes. All right, so PowerShell, it's an interpreted programming language. It's not compiled. There are components that you will write that will be used that are compiled, but in terms of when you write a PowerShell script, it itself is not generally compiled. And I mentioned virtually all Windows operating systems have it by default, and it's available on Linux and Mac OS. It's based on the .NET framework. Why would you care? Well, if you have .NET experience, that would be interesting to you. But one of the biggest things about this is that because it's built on .NET, it is object-oriented. So once you refer a variable is at least some kind of object. Now, it may be a string object, but it could be a database object, a table object. Everything's an object. And once it's an object, there are methods that you can call to do some cool stuff. And also, if you've, I don't have any experience with C, but if you've done even PL SQL or T-SQL, if you've used variables before, you know it is relatively strongly typed in the sense that you have to declare your variable type. And in some cases, you have to say how large it is. PowerShell is much more laid back, not strongly typed, to be more technical. And if I'm going along and you have any questions, let me know, because we're going to be done before you know it at this rate. So why is it useful as a DBA? So the big thing is to make your processes more repeatable. If you are dealing with an estate of SQL servers, right, especially as we go to the cloud, infrastructure as code, the more you can script, the more you can ensure consistency and compliance with all of the standards that your company may have. And we have DBA-centric modules. What's a module? We'll talk about that. But in essence, it is specific commandlets, again, we'll talk about that in a second, that simplify common tasks. So an example of that is, well, first of all, I should ask, how many people here have experience doing any administration with SQL Server? Show of hands, please. Okay, so imagine, if you will, you have a database backup on one server, and this backup is striped across 8 different files, and it's a large database backup, and there are underlying secondary data files. Imagine there's 24 of them. right? What does your T-SQL restore database script look like? Is it 1 or 2 lines? No, it's over 30 lines, right? And this is an example I gave. And we're going to take a look at that later on.
What does Stripe mean?
So the idea here is you can take a database and back it up to a single file, a single .bak, or you can use different parameters or methods to store it across a whole bunch of different files. Why you would do that? Well, you think of striped disk, right? So when you had physical platters spinning and an arm going back and forth, and if you had hard drives that spinning on that could be helpful. Today we live in a very much a cloud-based world, right? And I don't know if you have much experience trying to restore a database backup from, say, an S3 bucket or the Azure equivalent of it, but it's not always fast. Specifically with AWS, it's really not fast compared to if it's a local file. But if you stripe it across, I think with SQL Server, you can do 64 separate files.
You set it up like partitions?
No, it's
Kind of a breakdown where like
well, you can partition, absolutely. But what I'm talking about is instead of saving it to a single file, you do whatever programming is necessary to use a whole bunch of files. And so it's writing to all the
like
files.
just a heap. It's just random stuff here, random stuff here, random stuff here.
Bidding among
It's
them.
distributing. So
Okay.
you have, if you could have up to 64 separate files of pretty much the exact same size, but they all have different content.
The size is what's important. Okay.
Yeah, so the idea is, and again, with my example, if you're restoring from an AWS S3 bucket, instead of having like 100 megabits per second on one file, you have 100 megabits per second across 64 files.
Get in parallel.
You get in parallel, the restore goes much more quickly. At least that's the idea. My experience with using an S3 bucket for restores was like 3 months worth. I'm nascent with it. All right.
Well, we can pay the rent here. I'll bet Azure's much faster.
I bet it is.
Yeah.
I bet it is.
Well, we're backing up directly from SQL Server to Azure Files.
Mhm.
It's kind of like their file share. We didn't do blob storage, so we're using Azure Files, but we were doing one file, back file.
Mhm.
We went to 4 back files for the bigger databases, and it doubled the time, or half the time. It was twice as fast. So.
Okay, so it sped it up noticeably. Excellent. So good to hear that validation. All right. So key elements. So we're talking about PowerShell. Some key elements are commandlets. CMDLETS is how it's written. It's pronounced commandlets. And it follows a certain standard. You can create your own commandlets. Most people don't, but it follows this convention: a verb, a hyphen, and then a noun. So an example of this would be get credential. Right? So you're going to, I'll have some examples, but you could have a variable called mycred equals get hyphen credential. You hit enter, and what it will do is it will prompt you to provide your username, your password, and then that is a credential object and is stored in the mycred variable. And take a look. I'm going to walk in front of the room here, the audience. I mentioned it's not PowerShell is not tightly cast. Strongly typed. Yes. Thank you. I need some help. It's a group effort here. Okay. So here you have an example. $number is a variable called number. It's equal to 5. $number is equal to double quote 5 written out as a word. $number is equal to 1 plus 4. $number is equal to, open parentheses, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in each one of these, okay, we have a number, we have a string. The third one is also a number, right? But it'll calculate it. And then the last one is an array. So compare that to, say, Perl or another programming language. Your symbol at the front of the variable name would be different to let you know that you're talking about the variable. With PowerShell, it's just pretty much a $sign for most things. Any questions so far? And
Nuances of, so I assume it's going to infer what data type it's
Yes.
supposed to be. Are there nuances where like 1 plus 4, if I make it 1.0 plus 4.0, is that going to change whether it stores it as like an int or a float?
it will change it as it needs to. And also, I should point out, there may be times when you want to tightly cast it, and you can explicitly state its data type. You can do that. All right. And so in each of the cases on the left, you see me assign the value to the variable. On the right, you can see to actually get the value to show up on the screen, you just type the name of the variable from the command line, hit enter, and you get that. Also, I want to point out at the start of each line at the prompt, it starts capital P, capital S. That's, as you might guess, PowerShell.
Is the $ something that you need to do to explicitly state that something's a variable?
Yes, great question. Thank you. All right. Any other questions?
I didn't hear the last question.
Oh, yeah. So the question was, do we need the $ to let PowerShell know it's a variable? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
All right, aliases. So similar to Unix operating system, Linux operating system, and other programming languages, an alias simply makes it easier to refer to the same sort of binary or function, or in this case, commandlet. So for example, if you've used PowerShell before, even if you didn't necessarily mean to, and you say, oh, this looks like a command prompt, I'll type in dir and hit enter. That will work. It will list the contents of your current working directory. But you didn't actually execute a commandlet called dir. You actually execute, oh, come on in, make yourself, and if you want some pizza, grab some pizza.
I just had to.
All right.
Someone sitting here?
Nope. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. I was about to give away Jared's seat. Yeah, right here.
The presenter.
Yeah, there you go. Place of honor. There you go.
Thank you.
So when you type in dir or ls, that both are aliases for get-child object. That's simply by default, what are the contents of the current working directory? Now, there's another alias that I actually tend to use, GCI. There's no right or wrong here. You can use now, and then my next point, it's considered a best practice that if you're writing code that there's any chance that another human being is going to have to look at, please don't use an alias. Like, what's this GCI here? So you just explicitly write it out. Output and pipes. So the idea is you execute a commandlet. There's going to be some output pipes. If you've used a Linux or Unix, Solaris, any type operating system like that, you're familiar with pipes. So you get output, you have a pipe character, and then you have a command that runs, and it takes what comes into the pipe as input for the next process. All right. So let's see. Okay, so for example, a commandlet, when we're going to talk about different modules in a moment. So this is not installed by default, but we'll talk about modules in a moment. With the right module, you will have this commandlet called get DBA database. You could probably get or guess what that is, right? It's go connect to a instance of SQL Server and then list databases, and you can specify the database instance you're connecting to and some other things. You can maybe provide some information if you only want a certain database, but it's going to list the databases. And by default, remember, everything's an object. So it's going to list like 16 lines of key value pairs that represents a database object. And so what you can do is you can pipe that into one of the most common commandlets there is, and that is format table. And the alias to format table probably wouldn't surprise you, just FT. All right, it's not measuring distance here. It's just FT is format table. What that will do is it will take these key value pairs that are 16 lines represents one thing, and what it will do is it will turn it into tabular format, so that if you have, say, 10 databases, instead of having 160 lines, 16 lines per times 10, 160, it'll actually just be 10 lines. Any questions so far?
I feel like I feel like database means something different here that I'm used to. Is a database like how I would think of a table in a database? Is it an entire?
Yeah, right. So talking about hierarchy, you have a database instance.
Mhm.
In that database instance, there will be a database like AdventureWorks. And in AdventureWorks, we don't necessarily have to pay attention to schema, but you'd have a schema.
Mhm.
And then in each schema, then you would have objects, including tables.
Yeah.
Right. So when in this case, we are getting
Pairs.
all the databases for a given database instance, a database server.
And so then what are the key value pairs of
So I will, that's, it'll probably be easier to show you. If I don't answer your question, please ask it at the end. Do you have a question?
Yeah, so when you run this command, I guess, is this going to connect to instance running locally, or is this going to connect to, is it going to ask for credentials to connect to something remotely?
I will have some examples. That's a great question.
Yeah.
And some commandlets are written smart enough, I'll say, that if you don't specify which computer or which SQL instance you want to connect to, that it will try locally. But it's not, unfortunately, it's not consistent. This comes from DBA Tools, which largely is wildly popular among people I've talked to. I've got the Pats, right? We talk about this. But because there are so many different commandlets and it's community driven, there are occasionally some inconsistencies where, well, with this commandlet, I don't have to specify and it will assume localhost, but with this one, I have to explicitly select. So, you know, you as you use it, you'll pick up on which one's which. Great question. Any other questions? All right. And this is interesting. Something about hand gestures?
Oh, sorry, moving your hand, so things that you.
Really? Okay, this is because when I'm presenting, I move my hands a lot, so who knows what it's going to do.
There's a question in the chat too.
Is there a question in the chat?
Yeah, that's me. Hi.
Script to find where a stored procedure is located in a database instance.
That's a good question. I will actually talk about traversing and looking at different objects inside a database. If I don't answer that question, please ask it again. All right?
Okay, thanks.
Parking lot. I'll write a parking lot.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Jared. Appreciate that. Jared is very much a full service host.
Yes, indeed.
All right. All right. So how many commandlets are there? Well, if you want to have fun, do I have it on here?
No fun.
No, well, yeah, the get command to commandlet. Wouldn't that be fun? I think it's called get command. Will actually, I think, list every commandlet, and it's bonkers. There's a lot of them there. But I want to point out, if you're only going to know a few, for general purposes, a huge fan of get help. If you're from a Linux background at all, this is like the man page, right? And Microsoft and others who've contributed has done a great job of giving you information that you need in a very logical order. Now, commandlets take parameters, like a lot of programs do. So you can actually, get help will give a certain level of information, and there are parameters you can specify to give examples in more detail. All right, get member. This is huge. So remember, everything in PowerShells.net is an object, right? So objects have properties, they have methods, generally speaking, right? So what you can do is you can have your object, maybe it's in a variable, or maybe it's just the output of a commandlet, pipe, and then get -member, and it will list all these things. Just give you a simple little blurb on the identifier of the method. It'll tell you that it's a method versus a property, and it'll have some other information. Like, is this just a get? Is it a get set? Things of that nature. Again, we'll have some examples. So for example, I have here get child object. Remember, that's like dir, ls, get member. And then what it will do is it will tell you, oh, this is a text file, and this is this, and this is that. Format table. So if you do get child object, it will be somewhat tabular, but you can use format table. Format table does a couple of things. One, it will return things in a tabular format, but you can also, after putting format table, you can specify the names of the different properties that you want returned. By default, it will give you a certain set, but there could be 100 other properties you choose from. Any questions before I move on? Okay, in the back there.
Do you also get nested if it's a nested object, would you also get more than just?
It's more, I think what you, okay, so there's gonna be, I'll steal my thunder a little bit. There's a case, it's not exactly what you're asking, but it's close, where we're gonna be looking at a certain database object, and different properties are in essence strings that represent like a name. But there's one of them where there's multiple names. So that's an array. So what you'll see is, for the things that are just a simple string, a string. For the things that are an array, curly braces, and then inside of it. So not exactly what you're talking about. And you can work with, JSON objects and anything you can do with .NET. There's a way you can attack it with PowerShell. Great question. Another question over there. We'll come over here.
Yeah, so get child object will return a list of all the things in your working directory, right?
Yes.
Get member, is that then going to return the methods and properties of everything in your working directory, or do you specify one object within?
You will have best results. If you have 100 objects in your directory and they're the same type of object, you can just use get member. If you have for some reason, you have different combinations of objects, it would be better to specify the specific object you want the properties.
Does it just return all of the distinct methods and properties of all things in that directory, or?
I have not played enough of it to be able to authoritatively answer it. That'd be an exercise left to the reader.
Are you able to input get member of one specific object in here?
So again, it's get member, receives it from whatever is in the pipe in front of it. So in front of that, you have get child object. You can provide parameters. So you just return a single object pipe, and then get member, and then that will be the methods and the properties of that object that was put into the pipe. Okay, great question. I think you were next.
Yeah, so when you're speaking kind of about the community maintenance with these modules, so kind of just mapping concepts. So are we thinking of modules as being packages that you'd see in other distributions? And are you getting these with a package manager like Foplity or Winget or something like that?
Great question. That's covered in modules in an upcoming slide.
Okay, got you.
Okay.
Perfect.
But you've got the idea.
Okay.
All right, how do you get PowerShell? Again, get Windows, you'll get PowerShell. PowerShell has been around for a while, so a lot of versions will have something around PowerShell, say 5, but I think PowerShell, 7.4 or thereabouts, I think is the most modern version, so you can upgrade. But if you have something that's not Windows, then you would, for Mac, there's 2 different ways you can use it. Visual Studio Code. I saw Visual Studio Code. I thought it was kind of cute. And then I started to get more and more. The more I use it, the more I've really, really come to appreciate Visual Studio Code, which, by the way, isn't just available for Windows. It's also available for Mac. I've used it on my Mac quite a bit. So you can get that as an extension so that you can execute PowerShell commands as inside a terminal in Visual Studio Code. But for the Mac, like a lot of software that you're going to execute from the command line, brew, specifically homebrew, but use the brew command, brew, install, -- cask, space, PowerShell, assuming you've installed homebrew, and boom, you've got PowerShell. It was about the easiest software I've ever installed on my Mac. Linux, and I have some links in here. That is, we talked about package managers a second ago. Like anything else, if you're using a package manager like apt-get or yum, you have the concept of the package manager has a repository that's using to where it's going to be pulling the different softwares. So step 1 is you add the repo. Step 2 is you install the software. So for Rail, sudo dnf install PowerShell MySQL. For Ubuntu, sudo apt-get install MySQL PowerShell. I mean, if you're familiar with those operating systems, this would probably be a familiar process. Any questions before we move on? By the way, I appreciate how interactive you guys are. This is making it so much more interesting for me. Modules. Okay, so we're talking about modules for you. So the idea is when you install PowerShell, there's a whole ton, hundreds at least, of different commandlets that you can use, general purpose, that are together very powerful to manipulate, say, for example, files, read files, write files, output to different types of files, text files, CSVs, things of that nature. What modules do is it's like extensions inside of Visual Studio Code. So that's going to add even more modules and it'll be specific to a task. And also something I'll point out is it's session based. So the idea is you're using PowerShell inside of some kind of terminal, right? So if you launch another PowerShell terminal, And on the first terminal, you use DBA tools, which will show, install module DBA tools, hit enter on terminal A here, and you go to terminal B and try to use a commandlet. It's not going to be there. It might actually infer, oh, you're trying to use something that I see is in this module, and then it will load it, but it's not loaded by default. It's specific to the given session you're on. So if you have PowerShell and if you have 4 tabs of different PowerShells, each tab will keep a separate session. So you kind of have to keep track of where you've loaded your module. So any question before I move on from there? Did I answer your question? Okay.
Are these case sensitive?
Great question. The beauty using Microsoft products in general, no, it's not.
Just typical to capitalize first letters and all that?
Yes. So what'll happen is, like a lot of other programming languages, including PowerShell, is you can tab to autocomplete. And when you do tab to autocomplete, if you don't have, I'll call it the official case, it will fix it for you, if you will, or change it to what is the official case. All right, great question. So I'm going to talk about, I think, three different modules with an honorable mention of the fourth. SQL PS. Okay, you'll probably guess SQL Server, PowerShell for SQL Server in essence. This is the original module for SQL Server. It's installed by default for compatibility. It's old. And it's better in general to use a more modern module. But one of the most common modules you will use that's part of SQL PS is invoke-SQL command. Execute a query. That query in essence could be a SQL query. It could be DDL, anything you would execute inside a. Right. The module, simply enough, simply called SQL Server. Notice there's no hyphens, there's no space. It's written as one word. It is the replacement for SQL PS. It's lighter weight than DBA tools. DBA tools is something I'm highly biased. I use quite a bit, but one of the advantages of SQL Server, there's a few of them. Lighter weight. Also, like SQL PS, SQL Server, the module, gives us the SQL Server drive. I'll show this. That'll be part of the live demo. My heart's starting to race as I'm thinking I'm getting closer to the live demo. Please be gentle. All right. So with SQL Server Drive, objects are treated like files and folders on an operating system. You can assign an object to a variable. And then once you have the variable assigned to the given object, you can get and set properties, call methods using that variable, which again, we'll have a demonstration of this so you can see what I mean, in case that isn't clear. So again, if you want to have this feature, it's going to be in SQL PS and it will be in SQL Server. It's not in DBA tools, at least not as last time I checked. And of course, the other big reason why you might want to use SQL Server versus some other modules, it's officially from Microsoft. All right, DBA tools. So again, it's community developed. It has extensive functionality beyond SQL Server. Generally, it's easier to use, but it has some limitations. Again, it's larger, it's clunkier, a little bit, takes longer to load. And then the other thing is when Microsoft updated their driver for SQL Server, they changed the driver such that by default, it will attempt to make a encrypted connection to your SQL Server database, and it will not trust the certificate by default. And the SQL Server module, every one of them has a parameter you can pass called -trust server certificate. And then, because if you're installing SQL Server for the very first time, your certificate isn't going to be installed. That's going to be step 12, right? But with DBA tools, there's actually 2 different commands you have to set to trust the certificate for the moment, and then another command if you want to trust it forever, all right, which is tied to your profile. Any questions before I move on? Again, we'll have demonstration in a moment. Okay, honorable mention, SQL Server DSC. DSC stands for Desired State Configuration. I'm glad I had that notes there, because if I tried to remember it in front of this audience, I'm afraid I might have forgotten. Do you have any experience using Ansible or Terraform? You probably know that 25-cent word that starts with the letter I. Anybody? idempotent.
Oh.
Idempotent. So you want to make an extra 10 grand, you want to make that promotion, put that in your vocabulary. Well, I like to use idempotent tools like Ansible and Terraform. What's idempotent? So the idea here is that with most programming languages, PowerShell, Perl, what have you, you have a list of commands. You execute the script and it will do what it is you are telling it to do. Do step A, do step B, do step C. With Ansible and Terraform, you don't tell it what to do. You tell it what you want, right? I want 2 SQL servers. I want them to have this name. I want to have this drive. I want each drive to have this amount of storage space. So you create a configuration file saying what it is you want with enough information for it to figure things out. And then what it will do is it will see what is the current state. And if it's not in that current state, it will take action to make things in the current state. I am not going to spend time covering it here because I didn't, to create this on my MacBook, the environment so use Azure, right? Here's a plug for you, Garrett. Anyway, and there's a link, but if you look up SQL Server DSC, and it is more work in terms of getting to know it because we're used to doing procedural type programs where you tell it what it is you want to do. Also, I said, generally speaking, SQL Server is not an interpreted language. With SQL Server DSC, you actually create a configuration file that, for whatever reason, gets compiled because that's just the way it's meant to be. MOF file, I believe.
Have you used SQL Server DSC at all, or is this an honorable mention? And I asked because I started years ago, and the product group was like, hey, we're not really doing much with this.
No? Okay.
So I don't know if that module's been updated in years. Maybe they came back to it, but with Terraform, Ansible, Bicep,
Yeah.
I'm guessing not.
Yeah, no, I don't have
I don't know.
a ton of experience. I just
Okay.
kind of did a hello world once and yeah. So anyway, it's there. All right, basics. So here we have some examples of PowerShell in action. This has nothing to do specifically with database administration or databases, business intelligence, but it's just showing you some simple math. So line 1 there, clear just means, well, clear the screen, right? I have a variable X, I'm assigning the value of 0, and I have a while loop. I'm going to check the value of X. And one of the things that you'll see with SQL Server with your if, while, and other similar logical checks, your logic, if you will be preceded with a hyphen. So hyphen LT for less than. So X is less than 4, do what's inside what follows. My value is $X. And then the next line 6 is just adding 1 to that value, right? And so you can see the output. My value is 0, my value is 1. And then it gets to 3, it adds 1 to it, and then it exits. Any questions on this? All right, let's move on. For each loops, I actually use this a lot. So I am going to create an array. Notice what the line 2 starts with. It's a $sign. Remember, variables, arrays, it's $signs regardless, right? Not tightly cast. So fruits, apple, banana, pear, peaches, maybe tomato, right? So for each fruit in fruits. So this is not regulation per se, it's technique. So for my array, I'm using a noun that's plural. And for my single strings, if you will, I'm using singular. You don't have to do that, but it'll make your code in general a little bit easier to read. And then what it's going to do for each fruit, for each element in the array, it's going to, so fruit will be assigned the first value in the array, and then it's going to continue until it reaches the end of the array. And you can see the output. Apple is a fruit, banana is fruit, and then finally at the end, maybe tomato is a fruit. Any questions?
A
Yes.
slight question. So I installed it, right?
Okay.
And so you're going over loops right now.
Yes.
And so I have a question about the get member kind of
Mhm.
commandlet.
Mhm.
If you do a list,
Mhm.
or you have let's say, well, first, if you just do a list of all strings and you get member,
Mhm.
it will give you the member details of strings of system.string, right?
Mhm.
If you do it of numbers, it'll do of int 32, right? But if you do a mix of numbers and strings, it'll print it for numbers and strings individually, but it's not doing it for each member, but it's doing it for each unique data type in the list. It's giving you a new
Mhm.
member. So I'm
Mhm.
wonder, is this like an implicit thing in PowerShell because of the object nature? Also, is this running like a .NET runtime under the hood, or what?
You cannot run PowerShell without some sort of .NET framework.
Interesting.
That is one of the requirements.
Interesting.
But I didn't actually necessarily answer your question. But generally speaking, with an array, you're going to have a better time if you keep to the same data type.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be something like a string. You can use it with databases. You can use it with tables. You for table in tables and then perform an action on the table, like change the owner, to rebuild the index, all sorts of stuff like that. Great question. Any other questions? All right, let's move on. Okay. Okay, demonstration. Oh my gosh. All right, let's go to the demonstration and I'm going to escape here so I can read my notes. All right. So I had, so again, this is a Mac, as you can tell, paid an extra $500 to get that fruit on the lid there. So I had Podman running locally, and then I have UTM, which is a virtualization platform. Separately of that, because I'm on the network, I'm going to do everything inside of UTM. Do you really care? Maybe not. But
What is UTM?
UTM, like Uniform Tango Mike, if you do a search, it's just a virtualization platform, like hypervisor, parallels, VirtualBox, fill in the blank. Right?
Oh, got it. Thanks.
Freer version of VMware.
Yes. Yes. Or VMware, yeah. In the business context, I think VMware's got the market cornered. So yes. And this Mac is running Apple Silicon. And so what I'm able to do is I'm actually able to emulate an x86 because Apple Silicon is an ARM processor. Anyway, so there's just some things you can do. All right. So like I said, there's a couple of different ways to get to PowerShell. And let's take a look at, okay, I'm sorry, give me a moment here. All right, so here we have Windows 11 running ARM. Okay, and got my PowerShell session here. Let's see, I'm going to do it from here. I guess I'm going to do it from here. Do I have SQL Server on here yet? That's a good question. History. So get history. Will tell you what you've done. I have imported DBA tools. Let me actually do a new session. Remember that PowerShell is session-based. Some modules don't play well with others because you could have one module that has a commandlet with something called get DBA database. And if the other module that you're trying to install also has get DBA database, then there's a conflict. So that's why it might be better not, generally speaking, it'd be better not to try to run the module SQL Server and the module get DBA tools, because sooner or later something's going to conflict. Let's see if I've got it here. Module SQL. Yes, I do have SQL Server installed. All right, so I've got this installed. Now let's see. Now I have commands available to me that I didn't have before. So I could say, oh, that's how I was going to show it. So I can connect to a database here, but I'm actually not going to connect this way. You may not have noticed this, but here we have SQL Server Management Studio, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this, and I don't know if you ever noticed it. See what that option is right there? Can you guys see that? Start PowerShell. Execute this, give it a second. And this is handy because at the moment, I did not set up Active Directory or anything like that. With PowerShell, you can take advantage of the power of Windows OS operating system and AD, and it sets up tokens and things of that nature. And you can use Windows authentication without having to specify credentials. This database was set up without Windows authentication. But because I executed from here, it passed the SQL Server authentication to this session, so I don't have to do anything special. Now, you can see it says PS because I'm using PowerShell. It's always going to start PS. And then we've got SQL Server : This is a SQL Server drive. And then it has a path to indicate this is the database engine versus an agent. And then I've got the name of my, the name of my server, which for all intents and purposes, well, it is just the IP address default. Okay, that's just the default instance versus a named instance. And then I'm in databases and get child object. And I can auto tab, or I can tab to autocomplete. Hopefully. Get child. What did I do wrong? GCI. Okay, there we go. Get child. I don't know what I did wrong, but anyway, GCI worked. Get child object. I only have one database. It's everybody's personal favorite. I'm sure AdventureWorks. So yeah, I'm going to change to the autocomplete with tab works generally speaking with PowerShell, but it doesn't work inside a SQL Server drive, generally speaking. At least I haven't noticed it too. Adventure. So you can see how badly I type. All right, and then I do get child object, and you can see I've got tables, I've got views, I've got triggers, users, all the toys. So let's take a look at tables. Do we have any tables? Why, yes. Yes, we do. So many of them that it needs time to think. And of course, this is the power and the wonder of live demos, because this didn't work this way when I was at home. Oh my gosh, it is.
Anytime you're sharing with teams, everything gets slower.
Oh, great. It's a feature.
Well, you know, you are on a Mac.
Well played. Well played. I respect that. All right, let's see if I do Control-C to exit. Okay. Would you guys believe me if I told you that there's a table called store? Is that asking too much to maybe? Okay. So, actually, you could probably do that. GCI, again, like ls or dir. And then where is really popular. That's short for where object. Name equals store. We'll do that. And yes, there is the store table. It's inside the sales schema. So let's assign an object. I'm sorry, assign a variable to this object. Store. Actually, I'm going to do it. I'll do something else in a second. Store. Now, inside of SSMS, there's a whole bunch of different things you can do to get information about your objects, right? So it's tables. The last one here is store. It's because it's a Mac. It has nothing to do with Teams, I'm sure. All right, so you have the different objects, columns, keys, indexes, constraints. So constraints should include, let's see, indexes. Okay. Keys. I'm looking for something specific. Okay. FK, anybody can tell me what FK stands for? Foreign key, right? So a foreign key, would that be referencing a parent object or a child object? I think of it as a parent, but I'm just speaking from the hip. I'll let you guys figure that out later. So what I've done here is where did it go? I have too many sessions open. All right, so store, I can call store and I can do in, and again, I can do autocomplete here because at this point, I have assigned the object of this table to the variable. I'm operating on the variable. Now the autocomplete and things of that nature work just fine. So here are the indexes. If you're not from IT, you might be referred to that as indices. This up a little bit. Right, so we've got primary keys, and that's good. And then I can foreign keys are foreign keys. And again, my screen isn't quite as big. And I can do FT for format table, and I can specify just a few columns. Now you can see referenced table, it's referenced space table. As in, when you're referring to attributes of an object, it's probably going to be that, but without spaces. Reference table and referenced key. Let's see if that worked. Then I can do auto size. Okay, that's easier to read, right? So this is the foreign key. So I think of that as a parent to this table. Now, you can get this from SQL Server Management Studio, but it gives you some more options. This is more for if there's any data architects in the room or on the phone. We have methods. Oh, let me use get member. I talked about that a little bit, right? Look at all these different things we can apply. Lots and lots of properties, but also, if I can scroll up, we have methods. And it's listed alphabetically, grouped first by methods, then properties. So let me do store and then enum foreign keys. Well, I just had the property foreign keys. It's not the same. That's the foreign keys for this table. This is going to show child objects for which this is their foreign key, which is the customer table. If you have a way to do that by just clicking inside of SSMS, I'd like you to show me maybe after class sometimes, but as far as I know, it doesn't exist. It's not that you can't get it. You can query the metadata of the database, but the point is there are methods that are available to you in PowerShell that are pretty cool. Any questions so far? All right, let me go ahead and actually go up a couple of levels because I want to demonstrate some things. Okay, so I've got, I need to go up one more, no. The database.
Watching you run DOS commands against SQL Server.
It's kind of weird. It's like, what are you on a directory? Is this a directory? What's going on? So I just have one database. So now, is there just one database on this instance? It's a trick question. No. There's one user database. There are these, what, 4 system databases, like master model, MSDB, such temp. So I'm going to assign
TempDB?
question.
No, how about TempDB? Can you include that too?
Yes, you can. And let me do that in a second. Okay, so if I reference AW, it's just like I did get child object, right? So there are methods. Okay, let me answer that so I don't forget. Get child. Okay, let me just do GCI. GCI. There are parameters like force. What that's going to do is that will give me every database, even the system databases. With DBA tools, again, this is the SQL Server module. DBA tools, it will by default give you all the databases. All right, so again, I've got AW, and it has methods, right? What methods do they have? Well, remember, you can run get member. Lots of them. Watch this. AW, and pay attention, because there's going to be a trick question coming up here. AW. I started to type the command, I hit tab. You'll notice that this ends with an open parentheses. That is my clue that this is a method and not a property. So I'm going to close the parentheses. Some methods take an input to the methods, some do not. This does not take a method. And I'm going to set it offline. And there's another method called, I think it's status. There's state and there's status. I sometimes get it mixed up in my head. I think this is the right one. Yes. All right. This is telling me that the status is normal. Interesting. But if I go to SSMS and do it up here, refresh, you'll see that the database is actually offline. Anybody like to take a guess why status is showing normal? Any programmers in the room? Okay. When I assigned the object to the variable, I took basically all its attributes and assigned it to that variable at that moment. Okay. Then I changed the actual underlying object. It's not like a pointer to the object. It's like kind of like a copy of the object. Not like I didn't copy an entire 200 gigs of data or anything like that. It's just attributes of it were copied. So, well, how do you freshen things up? I'm glad you asked. There's a command for that, a method. Refresh. Now, when I do status, it'll tell me it's offline. Now, if you think about it, isn't that the same as SQL Server? If I issued a command to take this database offline, did you notice that SQL Server Management Studio did not tell me that it was offline? I had to refresh it. So it's kind of the same thing. And then, of course, we'll try to take it back online. Live demo. Let's see if this works. I really hope it does. I'm checking the status. Oh, it still says it's offline. Is it?
Boom.
No refresh.
Hopefully not. I have to do the refresh. Now let's see. I mean, it could still be offline if something, no, it's normal. All right. So I just want to emphasize, if you assign an object, a variable, you're going to want to refresh. And you can do all sorts of things. You can drop tables, change ownership, but things are, this is going just a little bit long. So I'm going to try to speed things up. Are there any questions before I move on a little bit? Okay. All right, let me get back out to the operating system here. And hopefully that's the right key. Okay, DBA tools, again, near and dear to my heart in the sense that take a look again at that example I gave you earlier. One database, but it's backed up across a whole bunch of files, and it has underlying secondary files that were stored on the original server's U drive. Your new server doesn't have a U drive. So you have all these move commands. We don't have a database called Acme. The names were changed to protect the innocent. But literally, there's 26, and Ross probably knows the database I'm referring to. It's the one we've been talking about a whole lot these days. Yep. 26 different secondary data files, all on what used to be a U drive. So there would be 26 of these, move whatever to new location, right? From the U drive to the T drive, right? Does anybody really enjoy writing 50 lines of code to restore a single database? I mean, if you do, we all have our hobbies, right? All right. So you think DBA tools is a little bit better? Imagine one line. Restore DBA database, SQL instance, localhost, database, Acme, path, B, transfer, destination data directory, T, MS SQL, default, data. Done. Much nicer, right? Now, if the path only has backup files for a single database, you don't have to specify the database. So even less. And another thing that's really cool about this is if, say, you have, this is a backup directory and you keep multiple days, you've got full backups, you've got log backups, you've got differential backups. It's smart enough, it'll read the headers of every single one of your backup files and select the right ones to give you the most recent backup. Pretty nifty, huh?
So that relies on headers being accurate.
Well, if your headers aren't accurate, you probably have other issues.
Yeah, you got problems.
All right, so here's a helpful query for you. Get DBA database. Again, this is DBA tools, your SQL instance. I have SQL credential up here. This is for a SQL authenticated database. If you're using Windows, you have Windows authentication, that can be left off. Sort object. Oh, by the way, sort aside, if anybody plans on using PowerShell on Mac, I just recently discovered this. Sort by itself, there's actually an underlying OS command that actually interferes. You actually have to write sort object. Your property ID, format table, and then SQL instance, all these different things. And so this will tell you the SQL instance. This would normally be a server name, but again, I'm working with virtual machines here. The name of the database, the owner. Nobody here leaves SA, I hope. But this is just a LAMP server. The recovery model is simple. Maybe this is a production database. It's supposed to be full, normal. Encrypted, whether it's encrypted, if your data is supposed to be encrypted, the last backup, the last good DB check, and if all of a sudden this looks like it's from another century, well, maybe one of your processes aren't working the way it should. Any questions on this? All right, so here's some other, what I was going to do is we actually have a whole bunch of scripts where we just create all this maintenance. And I realized as I looked at it, most of what that was actually executing queries and then some general programming language to write the status somewhere. It wasn't successful, try this. Not successful, write failure, like all this. But largely the command was, it can invoke the, invoke SQL command. But there are some commands here that are specific to this module, like add DBA server role member, right? So if there are certain people, like groups that are supposed to be sysadmins, you can do that at the database level to a specific database at a certain role, like DBA. Like if your DBAs are supposed to be able to read the databases because they're supposed to troubleshoot why index or why query performance is so bad, you can add your DBA team, your group, your AV group to DBA. A DB data reader role for a given database. And if you do this on the model database, then you guys probably know then by default, every database that gets created later, that user will have that role. All right, set DB TCP port. Some companies that have 3 letters have security policies that say do not use the default port of 1433, because if you put it on a non-default port, your database will be so much more secure. I just worked there.
Mhm.
All right, so you can do that with a single command. Restart DBA service, pretty self-explanatory. Get DBA network certificate. Something to think about. We love SQL Server Management Studio. I love SQL Server Management Studio. I wouldn't want to have to do my job without it. But if you ever get in a situation where you have a locked down environment where you have to use, say, dev spaces or something like that, you can do a whole bunch of different things from the command line. And SSMS does take a while to fire out. Also, with almost all of these commands, SQL instance can take an array of different SQL instances. So you can take action on 10 servers at once, potentially. Work with network certificates for your TL certificate. Set DBA, the list of things we do. Like, for example, every once in a while, I'll run this and there'll be some DBA at the OCC whose initials are MM who forgot to change the owner to whatever the appropriate owner is. And unfortunately, he left evidence. So to conclude, PowerShell can be used across different OSs to speed and automate administrative tasks. Again, if you think about it, you have this wide estate. You can have a set of scripts so that if you have what we call like an accreditation process that we should non-standard port, SA is renamed, which is, there's a commandlet for that. And all these different things. If you're burdened with having to use extended events, I'm sorry, I feel your pain. Okay, you can actually send extended events. In essence, it's a SQL command that can execute inside that. But have these different programming steps to check, was your attempt to make a change successful, write it to, say, a database table to keep track of everything that you're supposed to do. But you can see how that makes things very, very reproducible. Any other questions? Is there anything in the parking lot I didn't address?
Did you get to how to find a?
Oh, stored procedures. Okay, I can do this real quick. And you can see how I was traversing SQL Server with the SQL Server drive. So we're going to go into a database. Databases, we'll go into where Adventure works. So let me Varus, but I mean, I can spell Adventure, I can spell Works, but maybe. Depends on how many people are watching. Okay, and then programmability, is that where it is? Or is it just stored procedures? There it is, stored procedures. And here we go, all the stored procedures. And there's only so many. I mean, I've seen databases with quite a few stored procedures. So again, you could do GCI, pipe it into where object, or just where is a good alias. Name, you do like, you always, with that, when you're doing like equal, like, less than, greater than, you always have to put the hyphen in front. That's something that gets me from time to time. And let's do star, log star, and boom. Those are the stored procedures that have log in their title. I think that was somebody on the phone that asked that question.
Yeah, Jack. So Jack, does that help you? If not, if you're looking, I know that there are sometimes obscure ways you may want to look for a stored procedure, like your name in it in a comment, because you don't remember the name or something.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Thanks.
Oh, and let me do one thing other here, log. Okay, so let me just show you one other thing. I had notes here, but
If I can
watch this. This is pretty cool, I think. Any object, again, I've assigned that object to a variable. Script is a method. So I hit this, and this gives me the DDL to create the object. So you can see, if you think about it, there's that in itself is pretty powerful in my mind. Great. Any other questions?
Can you repeat that command again?
Yeah,
didn't see
it's
it.
a method. It's a method. So what the idea here is you are assigning an object, it could be a table, store procedure, view, a database, everything's an object, right? Assign an object to a variable. I've called, and let me just hit so you can see which object it was. It was the store procedure. What did I do? The stored procedure called USP log error. I assigned that to that variable. And then and remember, if you forget, what can I do with this object? Get member. If you only know a few things, get member has to be in your tool belt because it's just so very, and you don't see it here because these are properties. It's a method. Where's the script?
First one.
Right there.
There it is right there. So again, in methods, you have to put parentheses at the end. And you can use tab to autocomplete. And again, you can take this and you can paste it, or not paste, redirect it to a file. You can use it as an input to a pipe process that's going to take that and execute it somewhere else. I mean, I haven't done it. I don't know if I necessarily recommend doing that, but you have options. Great question. Anything else? Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Really quick, I just want to check, Jack. So are you looking for text in the proc? How are you trying to search for this proc? What do you know about it that that you can use to find the procedure?
No, I just created a while ago, probably a year or two ago. I just don't remember where the store procedure is located in the DB instance. So
like, are you looking just to like list them, or do you have a keyword you can search on, or how would you find it should you have the tools? What's an identifying factor? Are you looking by like created by?
created by and where the store procedure is located in which database, because the database instance has multiple databases, so I don't know where it is and who created it, when it was created.
Right, I'm not going to take the time to try to code in front of a large
No.
live studio audience. We've gone a little bit past my target time, but take a look at the screen if you see that. Remember, we talked about loops, right? So what I did was, you can see procs, new variable, equals GCI, get child object. So what did that do? It took the contents of that entire working directory, which are my stored procedures, and loaded it as an array of objects into the variable called procs. And then you can see I have a for each proc in procs, and then I've got a set of curly braces. It's going to do everything that's inside those curly braces. So I could iterate through each stored procedure, get any attribute I want, and say, if I found the attribute of interest, then do something with it, like add it to a different variable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
My pleasure.
I'm just for the sake of giving something, this is a kind of a useful script. I don't know if I can drop a script into this Teams chat. I'll find out. I've got a SQL script where you can type in any string and search for it in any procedure.
Cool.
So I'll just drop that in there, but I would think if you use that for each, but then scripted each one so that you could see the text of the proc and then search for a string within that text. Although that may take even more than I think. In this case, PowerShell might not be a good way to do it.
It's actually pretty, my experience.
Where would you store all the script?
Well,
Would you iterate and search each one and then
yeah.
output the ones that match?
Yeah, so I'd create a new variable, like, and basically maybe put it'd be an array, right? Define an array. You can define an array, $, interest, whatever, $, anything equals, and then an opening parenthesis, close parenthesis. I think sometimes it's used as an @ open close parenthesis. That will sort of cast it if you will, into an array. And then as you iterate it, if you find a match, so there's nested logic.
Right.
If there's a match, take the name of the proc that's currently being processed, push it into that new array, and then continue on. And then at the very end of your process, list, call $interested, and it give you the list of all the products that had that string you were looking for in it.
Okay. That'd be cool. I like it.
Okay, well, my host, is there anything else we should do as an order of business for tonight?
Oh, that's pretty much it. Thank you for presenting, Matt. Very nice job. And we'll see you next month, October 9th, and Bill Lesher will be presenting.
Be awesome if at least one of you shows up.
And I mean, if there's anything else, any other questions or anything anybody wants to talk about right now, you know, we can use this time at the end to talk about anything.
Question. Are you guys gonna post this slide or video online?
Very good work.
So I've recorded